Before we start, hit subscribe and drop comment if you love these stories. All right, today's one is absolutely crazy. Let's dive in.
I didn't find out my wife was cheating. My daughter did, and she didn't tell me right away because she knew once she did nothing would ever be the same. I thought my marriage was just quiet. No fights, no drama, no problems. What I didn't realize was that silence was covering something much worse. When the truth finally came out, my wife didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She tried to control the story. And that's when I understood this wasn't about cheating anymore. It was about who finally stopped protecting the lie. Chapter 1. The fear every parent learns to ignore. I used to think fear was something you outgrew. Not courage. Fear. The childish kind. The kind that wakes you up at night for no reason and convinces you something terrible is already in motion. When Sarah and Marcus were small, fear made sense. It had a shape. Traffic, illness, stairs without railings, sharp corners disguised as furniture. Back then, fear was practical, almost useful. What no one tells you is that fear doesn't leave when your kids grow up. It just loses its urgency and gains imagination. It matures. It learns patience. Stops screaming and starts waiting. I learned this one morning at the kitchen table, staring at a mug I'd reheated twice without drinking. The house was quiet in the way only long-married houses get. Not peaceful, just efficient. Rebecca was upstairs getting ready for work. I could hear drawers opening and closing, each one precise, purposeful, and entirely uninterested in me. That sound used to mean something. Now it was just background noise, like a ceiling fan you forget is on until it squeaks. I'd spent years worrying about the wrong things. College tuition, career paths, whether Marcus would pick a major that required therapy later, whether Sarah would end up with someone who mistook confidence for volume, normal fears, acceptable ones. But the real fear, the one I never said out loud, was simpler and harder to explain. What if they turned out wrong, not unsuccessful, not unhappy, wrong? People like to pretend morality is automatic. That if you raise kids in a clean house with dinner at the table and consequences that fit the crime, decency just happens. Like teeth coming in. Like gravity, it doesn't. Decency is a choice, and choices get harder the older you get. I looked at my kids now, adults technically, and told myself I'd done well. Sarah had empathy. Marcus had restraint. Neither of them enjoyed cruelty. That alone put them ahead of most people I knew. I felt proud, quietly proud, the kind you don't say out loud because it feels like tempting fate. Rebecca came downstairs, heels clicking against the floor. "You're up early," she said, reaching for her keys. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. She nodded, already halfway through the doorway. We perfected these exchanges over the years. Sentences that sounded like conversation but functioned more like receipts. Proof we've been present. "Sarah coming by later?" she asked. She said she might. Another nod. Neutral, uninvested. The door closed behind her and the house returned to its baseline silence. I remember thinking very clearly that morning that I'd done my job. That whatever happened next in my life would be about me, about Rebecca and me, about aging, work, maybe boredom, normal adult problems, manageable ones. I didn't know yet that one of my children already knew something I didn't, and that the fear I'd ignored, the one without a name, had finally decided it was time to introduce itself. Chapter 2. A marriage that mistook silence for stability. If you'd asked me when our marriage started to go quiet, I wouldn't have had an answer. Not because I was hiding it, because nothing actually happened. That was the problem. Rebecca and I didn't explode. We didn't betray. We didn't slam doors or throw plates or scream things that required later apologies. We simply stopped updating each other, like software that still runs but hasn't been patched in years. Our mornings were efficient. Coffee brewed, toast popped, words exchanged strictly on a need-to-know basis. "Do we need milk? I picked some up yesterday." "Okay." No tension, no warmth, just confirmation. She stood at the counter reading emails on her phone already elsewhere. I sat at the table pretending to read the news while rereading the same paragraph for the third time. We were both awake. We were both functioning. We were both avoiding the same invisible question. "This is it, right?" Rebecca adjusted her blazer and glanced at the clock. "I'll be late tonight," she said. "For dinner?" "For everything." That was new phrasing. Efficient. Comprehensive. Okay, I said. She waited half a second as if expecting a follow-up. I didn't give her one. She nodded, satisfied, and left. I remember thinking how smooth it all was. No argument, no disappointment voiced. No expectations violated because none had been declared. We'd mastered coexistence. At some point, I'd started measuring the success of our marriage by what wasn't happening. No shouting meant harmony. No conflict meant health. Silence meant peace. That logic held up remarkably well, as long as you never tested it. In the evenings, we sat on opposite ends of the couch, the television filling the space between us like a neutral third party. We watched the same shows without discussing them. Occasionally, one of us would laugh half a second later than the other, and I'd notice, not because it mattered, but because it was something. Did you want to watch something else? I asked once. This is fine, she said. It always was. Our conversations had become logistical briefings, schedules, appointments, repairs, Sarah's visits, Marcus's tuition. We communicated like coworkers who respected each other's time. I used to think that meant maturity. It never occurred to me that intimacy doesn't vanish dramatically. It just stops asking for attention. It waits until you're too proud of the quiet to question it. One night, Rebecca mentioned a coworker, someone I didn't recognize. He's funny, she said, scrolling on her phone. Not in an annoying way. I nodded. That's rare. She smiled briefly, not at me. At the memory, I noticed the timing of it. The way the smile arrived uninvited and left without explanation. I cataloged it mentally, then dismissed it. Everyone is allowed to smile at work. Everyone is allowed to have a life that doesn't involve narrating it to their spouse. That's what trust looks like, I told myself. Or maybe that's what disengagement looks like when it's polite. Our marriage had great uptime. It never crashed, never froze, never demanded emergency intervention. It just stopped responding. And I, mistaking predictability for safety, kept telling myself that nothing breaking meant nothing was broken. The irony, of course, is that systems don't fail when they're allowed. They fail when no one is watching anymore. Chapter 3. The Daughter Who Returned with Unfinished Business. Sarah came home on a Tuesday. Not announced, not dramatic. Just a text that said, "I'm nearby. Thought I'd stop in." I was in the garage pretending to organize things that had already been organized when I heard her car pull up. The sound was familiar enough that my body reacted before my brain did. I wiped my hands on a rag I didn't need and went inside. She looked the same at first glance. Same posture, same half-smile that arrived early and left late. Same habit of hugging me a second longer than necessary, like she was checking whether I was still solid. "Hey, Dad," she said. "Hey, yourself." She smelled like travel and something floral I didn't recognize. Shampoo maybe, or a life that had continued without us. She dropped her bag by the stairs and looked around the kitchen, scanning it the way people scan old photographs, fond but alert for details that don't match memory. Rebecca came in from the living room a moment later. "Sarah," she said pleasantly, "you didn't say you were coming today." "I didn't know I was," Sarah replied. The words were fine. The tone wasn't. It wasn't rude. It wasn't sharp. It was measured, like she was choosing each syllable carefully, the way you do when the wrong word could turn a conversation into an incident. Rebecca smiled anyway. She always did. A competent smile, one she could deploy without thinking. "Well, you're here now," she said. "That's nice." Sarah nodded. "Yeah." Then she looked at me. "So, how have you been?" It wasn't the question that caught my attention. It was the shift. The way her shoulders relaxed a fraction. The way her voice softened just enough to be noticeable if you were looking for it. Which I was. We sat at the table. Coffee appeared. Plates were offered and declined. The conversation moved forward the way conversations do when everyone agrees silently not to take risks. Sarah told me about work, about her apartment, about a friend who had adopted a dog that hated men but tolerated women with snacks. She laughed when she talked to me. Real laughter, the kind that shows up without rehearsal. When Rebecca asked her something, Sarah answered politely, briefly, like someone replying to an email they didn't want to encourage. "How's your lease situation?" Rebecca asked. Fine. Still thinking of moving? Not really. Pause. Sip of coffee. Neutral face. I watched it happen without knowing what I was watching. The imbalance was subtle, clean, almost elegant. This wasn't teenage rebellion. There was no eye-rolling, no sarcasm, no door slamming. This was restraint. Sarah was holding herself the way you hold a glass that's cracked. Carefully, evenly, pretending it isn't cutting into your hand. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it. Parents see patterns where there are none. We over-interpret tone. We read meaning into pauses. It's a professional hazard. Still, I couldn't ignore the math of the room. Warmth plus silence doesn't equal neutrality. It equals effort. At one point, Rebecca mentioned dinner plans. I was thinking pasta, she said, unless you had something else in mind. Sarah hesitated. Just long enough. No, that's fine. Fine again. The word had weight. Not much, but enough. After dinner, Sarah helped me clear the table. Rebecca went to the living room to take a call. Work-related, apparently. Everything was always work-related. Sarah stacked plates with unnecessary precision. You okay? I asked. She smiled automatically. Yeah. What? I shrugged. You just seem tired. She looked at me for a second too long. Then she nodded. Guess I am. That was it. No confession, no explanation, just a confirmation that didn't clarify anything. When she left that night, she hugged me again. Same extra second, same quiet check for stability. Love you, she said. Love you too. She didn't say it to Rebecca. Rebecca didn't seem to notice. I stood in the doorway and watched Sarah's tail lights disappear down the street, feeling unsettled in a way I couldn't justify yet. Like I'd walked past a door that was slightly open and decided not to look inside. At the time, I told myself it was nothing. Later, I'd realized that nothing is off and just something waiting to be named. Chapter 4. The man who never stopped mediating. The argument didn't announce itself. It arrived the way most of our problems did, quietly, disguised as a misunderstanding that everyone pretended would resolve on its own. Sarah was in the kitchen rinsing her mug at the sink. Rebecca was behind her reorganizing a drawer that hadn't needed reorganizing in years. I was at the table reading something on my phone without absorbing a word of it. The house was performing its usual routine. You don't have to wash that, Rebecca said. I'll load the dishwasher later. I know, Sarah replied. I just didn't want to leave it there. There was nothing wrong with either sentence. If you'd written them down, they would have passed inspection. It was the space between them that mattered. Rebecca paused, just long enough to notice. You don't have to act like everything's a mess, she said lightly, almost friendly. Sarah kept rinsing the mug. I'm not. Well, it kind of comes off that way. There it was. Not an accusation. Not yet. Just a suggestion. The kind that floats into the room and waits to see if anyone reacts. Sarah set the mug on the rack a little harder than necessary. I just cleaned up after myself. I didn't say you didn't, Rebecca said. I'm just saying you don't need to. I know what you're saying. The temperature shifted. Not dramatically. Sly, like someone turning the dial one notch to the right. I looked up from my phone. Hey, I said lightly. It's fine. The mug's clean. Crisis averted. Both of them looked at me. Rebecca smiled first, grateful. Relieved. Sarah exhaled through her nose. I wasn't making it a crisis, she said. I know, I replied. Nobody is. That was my specialty. Declaring emotional ceasefires before anyone admitted they were at war. Rebecca leaned against the counter. I just don't want her feeling like she has to tiptoe around, she said. Sarah turned. I'm not tiptoeing. You kind of are. I stood up. Okay, I said. Calm, neutral, professional. Let's all just take a breath. 3 adults, 1 dishwasher. A conversation that had somehow become my responsibility. I'd done this so many times it no longer felt like a choice. My body moved before my thoughts did, like muscle memory from a job I'd never officially applied for. I reframed, softened, translated. Rebecca, I said, I think Sarah just wanted to help out. I know, she said quickly. I appreciate it, Sarah. I added, your mom's just saying you don't need to worry about it. I'm not worried, Sarah said. She stopped herself. That was new. She pressed her lips together, nodded once, and looked away. "I'm gonna go for a walk," she said. She grabbed her jacket and left without another word. The door closed. Not slammed, just closed. Rebecca turned to me. "I don't know why she gets so defensive," she said. I nodded automatically. "She's probably just tired," I said. "Travel does that." It was a good line. Familiar, non-confrontational. It smoothed things over nicely. Too nicely. Rebecca accepted it and moved on, already reorganizing something else. The moment passed and neatly archived. I stood there a second longer, staring at the closed door. I'd been doing this for decades, absorbing tension, redistributing blame, making sure nothing escalated far enough to require honesty. I never asked who was right. I asked what would make it quieter. At some point, mediation stopped being a skill and became a personality. I should have built hourly. At least then I could have pretended it was a job and not a habit. I went back to the table and picked up my phone again, scrolling without seeing, feeling the dull satisfaction of a crisis avoided. What I didn't realize yet was that every time I diffused something, I wasn't fixing it. I was just delaying the part where it finally stopped asking for permission. Chapter 5. An apology that raised red flags. Sarah left just before dusk. Not abruptly, not angrily. She gathered her things with the same careful movements she'd been using all day, like she was trying not to disturb something fragile. Maybe your time. I should get going," she said, slipping her jacket on. Rebecca was in the living room half watching something with subtitles she never read. "Drive safe," she said. "I still on the screen." Sarah nodded, then looked at me. "Walk me out?" she asked. That alone should have told me something. She didn't need help. She just needed distance. Outside, the air had cooled enough to feel intentional. Sarah stood by her car, keys already in hand, not unlocking it yet. She stared at the windshield like it might say something useful. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded immediately. Too immediately. "Yeah, I'm fine." There it was again. Fine. The most flexible word in the English language. It can mean contentment, exhaustion, resignation, or a polite refusal to explain yourself. She stepped forward and hugged me. It wasn't a quick hug. It wasn't casual. It had weight. Her shoulders shook once, then again. I felt it before I heard it. The quiet, contained kind of crying that doesn't want witnesses. "I'm sorry," she said into my shoulder. I pulled back just enough to look at her. "For what?" She wiped at her face, embarrassed now. The way people get when emotion shows up uninvited. "I don't know," she said. I'm sorry." That was the moment something in my head shifted. Not loudly, just enough to register. People apologize when they've done something wrong or when they think they have or when they're about to. "You didn't do anything." I said whatever that was back there, it wasn't a big deal. She nodded again. Too fast. I know, but she didn't look relieved. She looked obligated. Like someone handing over a receipt they didn't need to keep anymore. I tried again. "If something's going on, something you want to talk about, you can tell me." She shook her head. "It's not about me," she said quickly. "Nothing in my life. I'm okay." That answer landed wrong. People who are okay don't rush to clarify it. They don't defend it. I studied her face, the tension around her eyes, the way her jaw stayed tight even when she smiled. "All right," I said carefully. "Just know I'm here." She smiled then. A real one, but tired, like it had been used too many times already. "I know. That's why this is hard." She froze the second the words left her mouth. Hard. She opened her car door like she'd said too much and needed an exit strategy. "Love you," she said. "Love you too." She got in, started the engine, and drove off without looking back. I stood there longer than necessary, listening to the sound of her car fade into the street. The driveway felt too empty afterward, like it had lost something it wasn't designed to hold. Inside, Rebecca asked, "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said. "She's just tired." The lie came out smoothly, practiced useful. Rebecca accepted it without question and went back to her show. I went to the kitchen and stood there staring at the sink, replaying the moment in my head. The hug, the apology, the timing. The most dangerous apologies are the ones that arrive early before the damage is visible before anyone asks for them. They're not about what's happened yet. They're about what's coming. At the time, I didn't understand what Sarah was apologizing for. I just knew without knowing why that it wasn't mine to accept. Chapter 6. A Mother's Talent for Rewriting Reality. By the next morning, the incident had been filed away. Not resolved, not discussed. Filed. Rebecca stood at the kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone, coffee cooling untouched beside her. She looked relaxed, restored, the kind of calm that comes from deciding unilaterally that something is over. She was dramatic, Rebecca said without looking up. It wasn't a continuation of a conversation. It was an opening statement. I folded the newspaper I hadn't read and set it aside. She seemed upset, I said. Rebecca laughed lightly, not amused, dismissive. She always is about something. That was how she did it. No denial of the emotion itself, just a quiet reassignment of blame. Sarah wasn't upset for a reason. She was upset by nature, a personality flaw, a chronic condition. You saw how she snapped. Rebecca continued over a mug. It didn't seem like it was about the mug. Rebecca finally looked at me. Thomas, she said patiently. The way people speak to children and underperforming coworkers, you always do this. Do what? Make excuses for her. There it was. The pivot. No curiosity, no questions, just a clean narrative with clear roles. I'm not making excuses, I said. I'm just saying she looked like something was bothering her. Rebecca shook her head. She's been like that since she was a teenager. Moody, sensitive. Everything's a personal attack. I watched her say it. How easily it came out. How practiced. This wasn't frustration. This was muscle memory. She didn't say anything disrespectful. I said she didn't have to, Rebecca replied. You could feel it. I nodded slowly. Yes, you could. But we were feeling different things. Rebecca sipped her coffee. It had gone cold and set it down like the coffee had personally disappointed her. You know, she said, sometimes I think she resents me. Always has. For what? Rebecca shrugged. I don't know. Being her mother. It was impressive really how quickly she managed to make Sarah's distress about herself. Not in a dramatic way, in a tidy, efficient one. I try so hard with her, Rebecca continued. And she looks at me like I've done something wrong. I waited for the next sentence. The one where she might wonder if she had it never came. You don't think she was holding something back? I asked. Rebecca scoffed. She always is. That's the problem. She stores things up so she can throw them later. I pictured Sarah at the sink carefully rinsing her mug, holding herself still, choosing silence. Yes, I thought that does sound dangerous. You always side with her, Rebecca said suddenly. I looked up. I don't side with anyone. That's not how it feels, she replied. There it was again. Feelings acknowledged, but only hers. I wanted to point out the irony that Rebecca accused Sarah of being emotional while building entire arguments out of perception and instinct. That she called Sarah dramatic while narrating her own victimhood in perfect detail. I didn't. Instead, I said, I'm just trying to understand. Rebecca softened then. Just a little. That's sweet, she said. But you don't need to overthink it. Overthink, the official term for noticing patterns. She reached for her keys. I have a long day, she said. Try not to worry so much. The door closed behind her, leaving the kitchen quiet again. I stood there longer than necessary, staring at the place where she'd been standing, replaying the conversation in my head. Rebecca didn't deny Sarah's emotions. She denied Sarah's credibility. It was a subtle difference, but a devastating one. By the time I finished my coffee, I realized something uncomfortable. This wasn't new. It was just the first time I'd stopped smoothing it over for her. Chapter 7. Casual cruelty with perfect timing. Sarah came back 6 days later. That alone should have worried me. She wasn't impulsive. She didn't do things just because. If she returned that quickly, it meant whatever she'd left behind hadn't stayed quiet. She walked in like she'd practiced the entrance. Neutral expression, shoulders squared, voice steady. Hey, she said. Hey, I replied. Everything okay? Yeah, she said, just passing through. Rebecca looked up from the kitchen island where she was chopping vegetables with the focus of someone auditioning for domestic normally. Well, look at that, she said. We're popular this week. It wasn't sharp enough to challenge. Just enough to register. Sarah smiled politely and set her bag down. I forgot my charger last time. Of course, Rebecca said. That makes sense. It didn't sound like it did. Dinner came together the way it always did. Efficient, coordinated, quiet, the kind of meal that looks functional from the outside. Plates were filled. Glasses topped off. No one raised their voice, which is why the comment landed so cleanly. So, Rebecca said, swirling her wine, eyes still on her plate. Are you still seeing anyone? Sarah froze for half a second. No, she said. Not really, Rebecca humped. Well, she said, I suppose that's easier than trying to make long-distance work again. The sentence was soft, almost thoughtful. The effect was surgical. I felt it before I saw it. The way the air tightened. The way Sarah's posture changed like she'd been bracing for something and finally got it. Her breakup had been quiet, civil, the kind people praised because it didn't inconvenience anyone else. But I'd seen what it cost her. The way she avoided certain songs, certain cities, certain questions. Rebecca knew that. She took a sip of wine. I just worry, she continued, that you're getting too comfortable being alone. There it was. Not an insult, not advice, an assessment. Sarah didn't respond right away. She set her fork down carefully like it might make noise if she didn't. I'm fine, she said. Rebecca smiled. You always say that. Cleared my throat. Rebecca, I said gently. Maybe. Oh, I'm not judging. She interrupted. I just think it's important to be honest with ourselves. Sarah looked at me then. Not for help. Not yet. Just to see if I was paying attention. This wasn't concern. It was positioning. A small, precise comment delivered at exactly the wrong moment. Rebecca hadn't lit a match. She just removed the fire extinguisher and waited. I like being single, Sarah said. Calm, controlled. It's peaceful. Rebecca tilted her head. Is it? Or is it just easier than compromise? The room went still. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Sarah laughed once. A short, humorless sound that didn't belong in the room. That's an interesting thing to hear, she said. Why? Rebecca asked. I'm just saying. I know what you're saying. The same sentence, different weight. Sarah's hands were clenched in her lap now. Not shaking, just tight. Like she was holding something fragile and dangerous at the same time. I should go, she said. You just got here, Rebecca replied. I know. Sarah stood, grabbed her bag, and looked at me. Dad, she said. Can you walk me out? Rebecca frowned. What's going on now? Sarah didn't answer. Outside, the night had settled in quietly. Sarah exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for hours. I'm sorry, she said again. There it was. The apology early misplaced. I shook my head. You didn't do anything. She looked at the house, then back at me. I know, she said. That's the problem. She hugged me, got in her car, and drove away. Inside, Rebecca stared at the door. I don't know why she's so sensitive, she said. I didn't answer. Some people don't start fires. They just make sure there's nothing left to put them out. Chapter 8. The truth lands without asking permission. Sarah didn't leave that night. That was the first sign things were about to break. She stood in the kitchen after dinner, hands braced on the counter, staring at a spot just past the wall like she was waiting for permission from something that wasn't there. Rebecca was stacking plates with unnecessary force. I sat at the table aware. Too late. That silence had stopped being neutral. You don't have to hover, Rebecca said. I've got it. Sarah didn't turn around. I'm not hovering. You are. The word landed heavier than it should have. I watched Sarah inhale. Slow, deliberate. The kind of breath you take when you've already decided something and your body is just catching up. Why do you talk to me like that? She asked. Rebecca froze, then laughed. Like what? Sarah turned like I'm a problem you tolerate. Rebecca scoffed. That's ridiculous. I didn't intervene. Not yet. Something told me quietly, firmly, that stepping in now would be like interrupting a confession mid-sentence. Sarah's voice stayed steady, but her eyes didn't. You don't even like me, she said. You just like the idea that I don't embarrass you. That is such a dramatic thing to say. Rebecca snapped. Honestly, where does this come from? Sarah looked at me. Not for rescue, for witness. You want to know where it comes from? She said. Rebecca crossed her arms. Please enlighten me. The room went still. Truth doesn't shout. It waits for silence. And we'd finally given it enough. I'd rather be single forever, Sarah said, than pretend I'm in love with my husband like you do. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They just sat there. Rebecca stared at her, mouth slightly open like the sentence had been spoken in the wrong language. What did you just say? She asked. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't even breathe properly. I watched. Rebecca's confusion lasted exactly 1 second. Then it transformed cleanly, efficiently into rage. You ungrateful little... she started. How dare you say something like that? Sarah didn't back up. Deny it, she said. Her voice cracked, but she didn't retreat. Just deny it. Rebecca laughed sharply. Deny what? Your imagination. You think I don't know? Sarah shot back. You think I haven't known? I finally stood. Okay, I said. Let's slow down. Neither of them heard me. Rebecca pointed at Sarah like she'd found the villain in a play she'd been rehearsing for years. You've always hated me, she said. Ever since you were a teenager. This is just another one of your attacks. Sarah shook her head. No, she said, this is the first time I stopped protecting you. That landed harder than the accusation. Rebecca turned to me. Thomas, she said. Are you listening to this? I was. That was the problem. Sarah's hands were shaking now. Tears ran down her face, unchecked. But her voice was solid. A friend of mine saw you, she said, at the coast with someone else. The color drained from Rebecca's face so fast. It was almost impressive. I noticed that before anything else, before the shouting, before the denial, I noticed the timing. That's a lie. Rebecca screamed. You're lying. You've always wanted to ruin me. I have pictures, Sarah said quietly. That was when I understood. This wasn't an outburst. It wasn't teenage rebellion delayed by a decade. It wasn't jealousy or imagination or spite. This was endurance reaching its limit. Rebecca lunged forward, shouting, words tumbling over each other. Accusations, insults, deflections. I stepped between them just in time, one hand out, the other braced against the counter. That's enough, I said. Sarah sobbed now openly, but she didn't take anything back. Rebecca kept yelling, and in the middle of all that noise, something very calm settled in my chest. The clarity, chaos is loud, truth is patient, and the truth had just finished waiting. Chapter 9. Denial performed live. Rebecca didn't deny it the way innocent people do. There was no pause, no confusion, no reflexive, "What are you talking about?" No laugh of disbelief, no instinctive reach for logic. She went straight to volume. You are lying, she screamed, her voice sharp enough to cut through the room. You've always been a liar. Ever since you were a child. Sarah flinched, but she didn't step back. That's not true, she said. And you know it. I stood between them now, one arm slightly out. The way you do when you're not sure who's going to move next, but you know someone will. Rebecca laughed. A short barking sound that didn't contain humor so much as momentum. Oh, this is rich, she said. You accuse me of cheating. You after the way you've treated me for years. For years? Sarah repeated. I've been protecting you for years. Rebecca pointed at her like she'd just been handed evidence. There, you hear that, Thomas? She said, turning to me. She admits it. She's been plotting this. I didn't answer. I was watching her face. Denial, I realized, wasn't something Rebecca stumbled into. It was something she deployed. A performance, loud, fast, and relentless. If she never stopped talking, no one could examine the gaps. You're jealous, Rebecca continued. That's what this is. You can't stand that I have a life. Sarah shook her head, tears still falling, voice steady in a way that made my chest ache. I can't stand that you think lying is the same as living. Rebecca lunged forward. That was new. I moved instinctively, stepping fully between them now, both hands up. Stop, I said, louder than I meant to. Both of you. Rebecca tried to step around me. Get out of my way, she snapped. I'm not finished. Yes, you are, I said. She stared at me like I just betrayed her. So you're taking her side now. There it was. The binary, the trap. I didn't respond to the accusation. I responded to the behavior. Sarah, I said without looking away from Rebecca. Go get your keys. Rebecca scoffed. Oh, of course. Send her away. That's always how this ends. Sarah hesitated. Dad, go, I said gently. I'll handle this. She moved past us, wiping her face with the sleeve of her jacket. Rebecca turned to follow her. I blocked her. Rebecca hit my chest with her palm. Not hard enough to hurt, just enough to be unmistakable. Move, she said. I didn't, Rebecca. I said, this stops now. She stared at me, breathing hard, eyes wild with the effort of maintaining her version of reality. This is unbelievable, she said. After everything I've done for this family, I almost laughed. Almost. Rebecca could deny gravity if it tripped her. She'd accused the floor of bias, claimed the fall was taken out of context. Sarah came back with her keys, eyes red but posture straight. I'm leaving, she said. Good, Rebecca snapped. Run away like you always do. That's enough, I said sharply. Sarah paused at the door. I didn't want to tell him, she said, voice breaking for the first time. I didn't want to hurt him. Rebecca laughed again. Don't flatter yourself. The door closed behind Sarah. The silence afterward was heavy, distorted, like the room didn't know what to do without an audience. Rebecca turned to me. You don't believe her, she said. It wasn't a question. I looked at her for a long moment at the clenched jaw, the flushed face, the certainty. I thought of confusion, of shock, of how innocent people react when reality contradicts them. I hadn't seen any of that. I believe, I said slowly, that you're very committed to your story. Her eyes narrowed. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. She scoffed and turned away, pacing the kitchen like a caged thing. You're overreacting, she said. This is nothing. She's making things up. I watched her move. Listened to the rhythm of denial repeating itself louder each time as if volume could replace evidence. And that was when it finally settled. This wasn't panic. It was control fighting to stay in charge. Chapter 10. Evidence doesn't argue. I met Sarah the next afternoon at a cafe halfway between her apartment and my office. Neutral ground. No history. The kind of place where nothing personal is supposed to happen, which makes it ideal for exactly that. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with a cup she hadn't touched. Her hands were folded around it like it was warm for reasons unrelated to temperature. You okay? I asked. She nodded once carefully. She looked at me like someone who had already apologized too many times and didn't know what else to offer. There it was again. The apology, persistent, misplaced for what? I asked for how it came out, she said, not for saying it. That distinction mattered more than she knew. I sat down and waited. I didn't rush her. Whatever she was carrying had survived weeks in silence. Could survive another minute. My friend Monica was on a trip, she said finally. A few cities away, coastal town. She spoke evenly now, like someone reciting facts they'd already accepted. She saw Mom there. At first, she thought it couldn't be her, but then she got closer. Sarah paused, watching my face. Not for reaction, but for readiness. She wasn't alone. Sarah continued. She was with a man. Not you. I nodded. Not because I understood. Because I was listening. They weren't hiding. She said they were comfortable, touching, laughing. He was putting sunscreen on her back. The image arrived fully formed, uninvited. Monica didn't say anything. Sarah went on. She didn't want to cause a scene. She took pictures instead. I waited. She sent them to me that night. Sarah finally reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, placing it on the table between us like an object that might detonate if handled incorrectly. I didn't want to show you right away, she said. I thought maybe it would stop. Or maybe I was wrong. Or maybe, I don't know. Her voice wavered then, just slightly. I didn't want to be the person who ended your marriage. I picked up the phone. The first photo loaded slowly as if even the screen wanted to soften the blow. There was Rebecca under a beach umbrella, sunglasses on, relaxed, familiar in a way that hurt more than shock would have. Her hand rested on the arm of a man I'd never seen before. Another photo, closer, the angle better. Another touching, intimate, casual in the way that suggested practice. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, not grief, confirmation. Photos don't interrupt. They don't argue. They don't care about timing or tone. They just wait until someone is ready to look at them. I didn't tell you because I was angry, Sarah said quietly. I was angry, but that wasn't why. I didn't tell you because I knew once I did, there was no going back. I handed the phone back. You did the right thing, I said. She blinked. I did. Yes. But it took me weeks. That doesn't make it wrong, I said. It makes it human. She exhaled, shoulders dropping for the first time since I'd seen her. I kept thinking, she said. If you've been married that long, what's a few more weeks with a cheating partner going to change? That line landed harder than anything else. I smiled faintly. Not because it was funny, because it was precise. You shouldn't have had to carry this, I said. I know, she replied. But I did. We sat there for a moment. The noise of the cafe moving around us, cups clinking, voices rising and falling, utterly indifferent to the fact that my life had just been edited without my consent. Evidence has a way of doing that. It doesn't shout. It doesn't plead. It just waits until denial runs out of breath. Chapter 11. The lawyer who charged for honesty. Vincent Palmer didn't offer condolences. That's how I knew I'd come to the right place. His office smelled like old paper and coffee that had been reheated too many times. The kind of room where optimism went to be corrected. He closed the door behind me, gestured toward a chair, and sat without asking how I was. So, he said, opening a legal pad. How long? 31 years. He nodded once and wrote it down like a doctor recording a symptom that explained everything else. And you make more? He added, not asking. Yes. Another nod. Another note. Vincent and I had known each other for years. Not well. Well enough. Golf once in a while. Occasional dinners enough to know that when he got quiet like this, he was calculating how bad the news was going to be. She cheating? He asked. Yes. He paused, then continued writing. That won't help you, he said. I almost laughed. Good to know. Vincent leaned back in his chair and finally looked at me. Long marriage, income disparity, no prenup, he said. You're looking at alimony. Possibly permanent. Permanent like retirement doesn't save you. I nodded. He waited for anger, for disbelief, for bargaining. None came. You'll probably keep some assets, he continued. House is a fight. Savings get split. You'll be fine, but you won't feel like you won. That's okay, I said. Vincent raised an eyebrow. It usually isn't. I shrugged. I didn't come here to win. That got his attention. Then why are you here? He asked. I thought of the photos of Rebecca's face when denial took over. Of Sarah apologizing for a truth that wasn't hers to soften. Because staying would cost less money, I said. And more of everything else. Vincent smiled faintly. Dignity has no tax deductions, he said. Believe me, I've looked. I exhaled through my nose. That was his version of comfort. He slid the pad toward me. If you go through with this, he said, it's going to hurt financially. There's no way around that. You'll write checks you don't like to people you don't recognize anymore. That's fine. No, he corrected gently. It's not, but it's survivable. I looked around the office, shelves of files, decades of endings cataloged alphabetically. How many people regret leaving? I asked. Vincent didn't answer right away. Some do, he said finally. Most regret staying too long. I nodded. That sounded right. We went over logistics, timelines, paperwork, language that reduced a life to sections and clauses. Vincent spoke plainly without embellishment. There was no moral framing, no outrage on my behalf, just math. When we finished, he stood and held out his hand. Call me when you're ready, he said. Or when she is. I shook his hand. Outside, the sun was too bright for the mood. Traffic moved like nothing had changed. People crossed streets unaware that my marriage had just been converted into a spreadsheet. I felt strangely calm. Stupidity, I'd learned, thrives in confusion. Clarity starves it. And for the first time since all of this began, I knew exactly what staying would cost me and exactly why I wasn't going to pay it. Chapter 12. Calm is the most inconvenient response. I waited until the house was quiet. Not asleep. Quiet. The kind that settles in after dinner. After the television has been turned off. After there's nowhere left to hide behind noise. Rebecca was at the dining table scrolling through her phone when I sat across from her. She didn't look up. You're late, she said. I stopped by somewhere, I replied. Where? I took my time. Calm is useless if you rush it. I met Sarah. That got her attention. She looked up sharply. Why? Because I wanted to hear the whole story. Her jaw tightened. She's manipulating you, Rebecca said immediately. She always has. I reached into my jacket and placed my phone on the table between us. She showed me something, I said. Rebecca glanced at the phone like it might bite. I don't want to see it, she said. You already have, I replied. She frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I unlocked the screen and slid it toward her. She didn't touch it. That's not me, she said quickly. For a moment, just a fraction, she hesitated. Not confusion, not regret, calculation. Then the denial snapped back into place. I hadn't even turned the screen around yet. That was interesting. I rotated the phone. There she was. Sunglasses, umbrella. A hand resting on someone else's arm with the familiarity of habit. Rebecca leaned forward, squinted, then leaned back. That's not me, she repeated. She's mistaken. You said you've never been to that coast, I said. She waved her hand dismissively. I meant recently. I don't remember. That could be anyone. Her explanations shifted the way smoke does when you try to grab it. You don't look surprised, I said. What am I supposed to look like? Confused, I replied. Curious, concerned, she scoffed. This is ridiculous. You're really going to throw away our marriage over some blurry photos and your daughter's imagination. I watched her closely. There was no shock, no instinctive outrage at being falsely accused. Just calculation. Calm unnerves liars more than shouting ever could. It gives them too much room to reveal themselves. I'm filing for divorce, I said. The words landed gently. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't soften it either. Rebecca stared at me like I'd just spoken in the wrong language. You're serious? Yes. She laughed then, not because it was funny, but because laughter buys time. So this is it? She said. You're choosing her over me. I shook my head. I'm choosing reality. That's not an answer, she snapped. It's the only one that matters. She stood abruptly, pacing now, hands gesturing like she could physically rearrange the conversation. You're overreacting, she said. People flirt. That doesn't mean anything. Then why lie? I didn't lie. You denied it before you saw it. She stopped pacing. That doesn't prove anything. Proves you weren't confused. Her eyes narrowed. You're unbelievable, she said. After everything I've done for you, I thought of the years, the routines, the silence, the careful avoidance of anything uncomfortable. Yes, I thought. Unbelievable is one word for it. I'll have papers served, I said. We can do this cleanly if you want. Her face hardened. Oh, I won't make this easy for you, she said. I nodded. I didn't expect you to. She looked at me then, not angry, not hurt, but assessing like someone recalculating the value of a lost investment. And in that moment, I felt something close to relief. The chaos had finally met something it couldn't negotiate with. Silence and calm. Chapter 13. When a parent crosses the final line. I didn't hear about it from Rebecca. That should have told me everything. Sarah called me late in the afternoon. Not crying, not panicked. Calm in the way people get after something frightening has already happened and there's nothing left to brace for. Mom came by, she said. I closed my laptop. Came by where? My apartment. The words landed slowly like they were checking whether I was ready. She didn't tell me she was coming. Sarah continued. She just showed up. I pictured it instantly. Rebecca had a closed door, hand already raised, certain of her right to knock. What happened? I asked. Sarah hesitated. Not because she didn't know what to say, but because she was choosing what not to say. She was angry, she said finally. Not sad, not confused. Angry. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Did you let her in? She pushed past me. Of course she did. She started yelling. Sarah said about how I ruined everything. How I'd misunderstood, how it wasn't a big deal and I should have stayed out of it. I imagined Rebecca's voice. Sharp, practiced, righteous. The tone she used when she believed volume could substitute for innocence. She called me ungrateful. Sarah said I was always trying to make her look bad. I closed my eyes. And the affair? I asked. Sarah let out a short, humorless breath. She didn't deny it. Not really, she said. So what if I did? There it was. Minimization. The final refuge of the indefensible. She said I didn't know what your marriage was like. Sarah continued. That I had no right to judge her. That you probably drove her to it. I nodded slowly. Did she leave on her own? I asked. No, Sarah said. I told her I was calling the police. There was a pause on the line. She left after that. I sat there in silence. Phone pressed to my ear, listening to the faint hum of the city through the window. You okay? I asked. Yes, Sarah said. I locked the door. I'm fine. She sounded steadier than I felt. I'm sorry, she said. Then I didn't want to put you in the middle. The apology again. Always early, always unnecessary. You didn't, I said. She did. After we hung up, I stayed where I was. Didn't move. Didn't think in sentences yet. Some apologies expire before they're offered. Some relationships cross a line so cleanly there's nothing left to debate. Rebecca hadn't just confronted our daughter. She'd chosen herself over the role she'd claimed mattered most. When Rebecca came home that evening, she acted like nothing had happened. Set her bag down, poured a drink, sat at the counter like the day hadn't required a police threat to end. You talked to Sarah? I said. She didn't look up. She's exaggerating. Rebecca replied. Did you go to her apartment? She paused. Just a fraction of a second. Yes. Did you push past her? She was blocking the doorway. Did you tell her the affair wasn't a big deal? Rebecca sighed. You're taking her side again. I looked at her then. Really looked. There was no remorse on her face. No embarrassment. Just irritation, like she'd been inconvenienced by consequences. Don't go near her again, I said. Rebecca laughed softly. You can't tell me what to do. I just did. She stared at me, eyes narrowing. You think you're so righteous, she said. You think you're better than me. No, I said. I think you're done. That got her attention with her. I clarified with being her mother. Her mouth opened closed. That's cruel, she said. No, I replied. It's accurate. She turned away, muttering something under her breath, already rewriting the story in her head. I stood there a moment longer, feeling something solidify inside me. Marriage can survive betrayal. Parenthood can't survive entitlement. And whatever Rebecca thought she was defending that afternoon, it wasn't family. It was control. Making one last visit before being escorted out. Chapter 14. The court decides the math, not the morals. By the time we stood in court, months had already passed. Months of paperwork, months of silence, months where nothing moved except money and resolve. The emotional decisions had been made long before the legal ones caught up. Courtrooms have a particular smell. Paper, coffee, old decisions that never quite leave the room. The kind of place where lives are flattened into folders and handed across tables by people who don't need to like you to finish their job. Rebecca arrived early. I arrived on time. That felt symbolic. She sat beside her attorney, posture straight, expression practiced, not angry, not ashamed, prepared. I wondered briefly how many times she'd rehearsed that face in the mirror. Probably the same way she rehearsed denial until it felt natural. Vincent leaned toward me. Remember, he said quietly, this isn't about right or wrong. It's about contracts. I nodded. I already knew. The judge spoke in a calm, neutral tone that suggested none of this was new. 31 years, shared assets, income disparity. The words fell into place like numbers in a formula that didn't care how we'd arrived here. Rebecca's attorney spoke about contributions, sacrifices, lifestyle expectations. He said nothing untrue. He also said nothing meaningful. When it was Vincent's turn, he argued cleanly, efficiently. He fought for the house, not for sentiment, but for logic, stability, continuity. The word children appeared just often enough to matter. I watched Rebecca as it happened. She didn't look at me. She looked ahead like the future was being announced, and she intended to collect it. The ruling came down without ceremony. I kept the house. Rebecca received a substantial settlement and long-term alimony. The gavel didn't slam, tapped lightly like punctuation. That was it. No moral commentary. No acknowledgement of infidelity. No concern for who had lied first or loudest. Contracts outlive character in courtrooms. Always have. Outside, Rebecca stopped me in the hallway. This didn't have to be this way, she said. I considered the sentence, the timing, the irony. No, I replied, but it was. She scoffed. You really think you won? I shook my head. I think it's over. She looked at me like that wasn't enough. Vincent touched my arm gently. Let's go, he said. In the parking lot, the sun was too bright again. It always was after court. Like the world insisted on continuing despite the paperwork. You did fine, Vincent said. Better than most. I paid a lot, I replied. He smiled thinly. Everyone does. I drove home alone. The house looked the same from the outside. Same lawn, same door, same place where silence had once passed for peace. Inside, the rooms felt different, not emptier, just honest. I stood in the living room for a long moment, listening. No television, no footsteps, no performance. The system had finished with us. It had divided what could be divided and ignored the rest. That was fair enough. Courts don't deal in truth. They deal in terms. And I'd finally agreed to mine. Chapter 15. Silence. That finally says enough. The first call came 5 days after the papers were signed. I didn't answer it, not out of anger, not out of strategy. I was making coffee, watching the machine drip like it always had, and I decided very calmly not to interrupt my morning for a voice that had already said everything it needed to say. The voicemail was short. I just want to talk, Rebecca said. We don't have to fight anymore. I deleted it without replaying it. The next call came that night. Then a text. We shouldn't end like this. That one lingered on the screen longer than the others. Not because it was persuasive, because it was inaccurate. We hadn't ended like this. We ended weeks ago. The paperwork had just caught up. Sarah called me that evening. She reached out, she said. I closed my eyes. I didn't respond, Sarah added quickly. I just wanted you to know. Thank you, I said. You don't owe her anything. I know. She sounded lighter than she had in months. Distance, it turned out, was therapeutic. Marcus handled it differently. Marcus didn't ask questions the way Sarah had. He didn't want evidence. He didn't want timelines. I'm not saying she's right, he said carefully. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I don't want this to turn into a war where someone has to lose a parent. I'm not asking you to choose. I said, I know, he replied. I just need to understand how to exist in the middle. That was Marcus. Always negotiating peace without pretending everything was fine. He called once. Careful with his words. I'm not picking sides, he said. I just don't want this to turn into something else. It won't. I told him you're allowed to love your mother. He exhaled, relieved. Rebecca's messages changed tone after that longer. Messier less certain. She apologized. Not for the affair, not at first, but for how things came out, for misunderstandings, for everyone being too emotional. The kind of apologies that arrive late and incomplete, hoping to be filled in by the listener. Then one night around midnight, my phone lit up again. A long message, no punctuation, no restraint. She admitted it, said it meant nothing, said she was lonely, said she missed me, said she'd lost herself, said she didn't know how things had gone so far. I read it once, then I took a screenshot and closed the app. I didn't reply, not because I didn't have anything to say, because saying it wouldn't change anything. Some conversations don't lead to closure. They just reopen wounds to prove they still hurt. The house settled into its new rhythm. Quieter, not emptier, cleaner. I noticed things again. The way the light moved across the floor in the afternoon. The absence of tension where it used to live like a draft you got used to. Rebecca tried again a week later, then again after that. Each attempt sounded more urgent than the last. Like someone knocking on a door they'd already sold. I never answered. Silence isn't passive. It's a decision, one that requires consistency. One afternoon, I stood in the kitchen, phone face down on the counter, listening to nothing in particular. No voices, no explanations, no rewriting. And that was when it finally settled. Peace didn't arrive with forgiveness. It arrived when I stopped answering. Thanks for listening to Thomas and Sarah's story. Sometimes the truth is the hardest gift to give. Question for you. If you were Sarah, would you have told the truth right away or waited? Let us know in the comments. Like and subscribe for more stories. See you next time.